Hello and welcome to the workshop here in Millbrook, Cornwall. I did a short video a little while back of it was a sort of a demonstration of our lever-based windlass, and I wanted to do the same thing with a geared windlass. This is our model, what we call a model number 2 windlass, designed for vessels of between 20 and 45 tons. For the heavier vessels it would have a different gearing arrangement inside of here. But for in this case we've got a dual ratio arrangement, and that gives you, on this main input shaft here, gives you a ratio of 4.33 to 1. What that means basically is if you rotate this 4.33 times, the main input shaft, and you get 1 revolution of the gypsy here. But as I said, it's a dual ratio, and there's another input shaft back here that if you rotate this 2.5 times, you'll get 1 revolution of the gypsy here. These come in several different trim specifications. They'll come in workboat, what we call workboat trim, which is mainly sort of painted iron and galvanized, right through to an all bronze windlass. In this case here, as you can see, there's quite a lot of bronze on this particular windlass, and stainless steel as well, but it also has a painted iron housing. It has 2 warping drums, and the gypsy was made in-house here. We cast them on occasions, and we have standard cast specifications, but in this case this one was machined from solid in-house. And the reason for that was that a customer supplied us with his own chain, and the gypsy was made to fit the existing chain on the boat. This one has a hand wheel, and hand wheels tend to remain in position on the windlass, as opposed to a crank handle, which would be taken off the windlass and stowed when it's not in use. So because this stays in position, this has a spring arrangement on it so that it doesn't remain engaged. The difficulty being that as you're running the chain out, this shaft here spins quite rapidly, and it would be dangerous if this wheel was spinning. Particularly this part here, this handle here, could hit somebody, cause injury. So this is pushed into position to engage and operate the windlass, and then it automatically just slides back out again when it's not in use, and just sits there free to rotate, so that as you're running the chain out, it's just moving a little bit, but it's certainly not spinning and that sort of thing. We have a hand wheel operated brake, so I'll spin this around sideways so you can see that whole assembly a little bit more clearly. We have a hand wheel operated brake on this windlass. There's an option, you can also have a lever operated brake, which doesn't lock in position. It's perfectly okay, perfectly suitable for the job, but I tend to prefer the hand wheel operated brake because that can be locked in position, which is handy at certain times. There's different sorts of lubrication arrangements. The workboat trim windlasses can be oiled by just simply putting the oil down the inside of the housing here, where it runs down onto the shaft, the main shaft, and also onto these bearings higher up in the housing here. But in this particular case here, we've got these grease pots here, which are linked down to the main bearing via these copper tubes here, and you just rotate these pots are full of grease. You just rotate these around to inject grease down to the main bearing. And we've also got these little plugs that are removed. They just stop dirt going in there, and you can squirt a little bit of oil in there and just put the plug back in, and that acts as a sort of a piston and pushes the oil down onto the shaft there. And also we've got some grease nipples dotted about here. One here which is injecting grease into the annulus area between the shaft and this housing here, and greases both bearings. And then there's one here as well in the brake bracket. So to operate this windlass, you can we're assuming that your anchor is pinned or lashed in position, and what we would do is take the pull off the pull profile here, make sure that the brake is backed off, and then you would basically pull some chain out from the chain locker over the gypsy. The windlass can freely rotate now, so you'd be able to pull a couple of feet of chain, 2-3 feet of chain, whatever works on your boat, out of the chain locker, and then you would go and untie or unpin the anchor, lock this in position, and then go and untie or unpin the anchor. Push the anchor out so that you use this the free chain that you just pulled out of the chain locker, so that the anchor is now hanging above the water. And then you come back to the windlass and you let the brake off, and you're basically deploying chain then until you've deployed as much as you need to. You then slow this down and stop it using the brake, stop the anchor chain running out using the brake, and then you'd attach your snubbing line, bring that back on board, and attach it to one of your ordinarily we do have a bollard on top of here, but in this particular case the owner has the customer has asked us not to have the bollard on top of here, so that was removed. But normally you would attach the snubbing line back to here, and once that was in position, you'd back the brake off again and let the tension go onto the snubbing line. You can flick the pull back in there as a safety measure, but there shouldn't be any load at the windlass at that point, and that's just really a precautionary measure. So, and now you're at anchor, you've been at anchor, you want to retrieve the anchor. What you would do is if the pull hadn't been put into position there, you would put that in position, and you'd back the brake off, make sure the brake was off, and then basically you would start to retrieve the chain until you took the tension off the snubbing line. Then you'd remove the snubbing line, and then you'd basically continue to bring the chain in on board. You might find that particularly in light weather conditions, that it would be quicker for you to use the other ratio here, and that would just mean that you've got you can make some quicker progress there using this input shaft over here. There's a difference between the crank handle and the wheel. You have 160 millimeters between the center line of this wheel and the center line of the handle, and you have 250 between the two center lines here, giving you a lot more leverage if you need to apply a greater force. So once you've got the anchor back to the boat, you bring the anchor back up in through the through your bow roller or whatever arrangement you have on your boat. Secure it back in position, and then you're ready to go. So I think that pretty much covers it. Actually, there's one more option here, which is a means of powering the windlass. Down at the aft end of the windlass here, we've got a web down here where you can attach a thing called a torque arm. The torque arm comes off a device we call an EDU, an electric drive unit. The electric drive unit is just slid into position on the shaft here. You attach the torque arm, and then with a wireless control you can drive the windlass electrically, and that makes life a lot easier, obviously, if you so desire. And that pretty much covers it, I think. So thanks for watching.